What's up, everyone? Okay, what's going on here? There we go. All right, sorry about that. YouTube did an update on a bunch of stuff, apparently, and the whole format on the back end is really different from last week. So, anyway, welcome to the What's Up Webcast. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatch USA YouTube channel. We cover everything from what's up in the nighttime sky to equipment to helpful tips and tricks. And of course, at the end of the month, we have a special guest to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. Today, we are revisiting a episode that we did, I don't even know how many years ago. It was one of our early episodes. Excuse me, a little cold out here. But we are revisiting visual filters, and so that'll be our topic today, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, if you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on a video, let us know that we're doing a good job. If you have a idea for a future episode, email us at info@skywatchusa.com. We've also had some people looking to get a hold of me directly. You can do that by just emailing info@skywatchusa.com. I can get into that email and check for any questions that you might be trying to get to me directly. I can try to answer those for you if you like. For everyone who's waiting on their totem patches, we're going to get all that hopefully going out next week. We'll get anything that's outstanding. And then, of course, December, we'll have to wait until after the holidays. But yes, we'll be getting those as well. We're also putting together next year's totem targets for the entire year. We will be doing that later today, actually. After this is done, that's what I will be working on this afternoon. But yes, there is a question there. Is this recorded? It will be after the episode airs. You can come back and watch this at any time. But right now it is not recorded because we're doing it live. But after all the episodes are done, they are saved as a recording on our library, and you can go back and watch anytime you want. So, okay. So, visual filters. Yeah, these are a great accessory that honestly every astronomer should have in their case. There is a variety of them, and I find what filters you have is really kind of a personal choice. There's a handful of them that I like to use. I'll go over my personal set towards the end. But this is just kind of a easy, digestible episode if you're just getting your first telescope and you want some accessories to go along with it. Maybe you have some equipment and you want to add some filters, or like probably many of us, it's just review. It's Friday and you're just wanting to hang out with us. That works too. So let me get this. Sorry, like I said, YouTube's back end thing really threw me for a loop this morning. There's like steps that are not there anymore, so it was a little weird. Also, really quick, just before we get to anything, next week is our last episode of the year, live episode, because then we dip into the holidays and our offices will be closed and we'll be spending time with family and friends, as many of us do. We will be doing an encore episode for Christmas and New Year's. So for, I believe the Christmas episode is going to be Erica Hamden. We had her on earlier this year. She was fantastic. And then I believe our New Year's episode will be a re-airing of Andrian's episode, who was amazing to talk to. And I hope we can get her back on someday. But so we'll have some reruns for the 2 weeks that we're not here. So if you want to come back and watch, you can. But they'll be rerun episodes, and we're always happy for you guys to be here. Last thing, if you want to support the channel, you can obviously head over to skywatcher.threadless.com, pick up some cool swag. And my thing is jumping ahead here. Let me get this back because I bumped something. You can pick up some cool swag at skywatcher.threadless.com. And then if you obviously want to support us even more, you can go over to skywatchusa.com, pick up your favorite stuff. We have a ton of stuff on sale. You can also go through your favorite dealer of choice. There's a bunch of ways to get it. But yeah, that's how you can get a part of it. And we'll go from there. So, a sneeze coming on. This morning is a mess. Anyway, let's just jump into this. So why visual filters? So this is the visible spectrum. This is captured from Kit Peak of the sun. This is a real visible spectrum captured from my friend Gil Esquerdo. So we'll be kind of using his contribution here to kind of highlight certain things throughout the episode and how the filters work. But this is the visible spectrum right here of the sun, and then we have all the lines in there, the absorption lines, or what these are. So every filter in astronomy is utilized for something. It's either blocking or it's doing something. So certain filters, let me just back this up. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Filters are visual aids, is what they are. They are used for a couple different things. And that is either going to be to reduce the brightness of a bright object, very similar to like what a solar filter does, or a moon filter, which we'll talk about that. So you can dim the image. You can also become more selective of wavelengths of light that you want to highlight. And then you can also block unwanted wavelengths. So really there's like three major bullet points that filters are working for us to do. And it just depends on what job you need done is how you would implement whatever type of filter. And we're going to talk about the different types here. Again, we're specifically talking about visual filters. I'm not talking about astrophotography filters. We have several episodes on that if you want to know more about it. Visual filters tend to be easier to work with because there's not a lot of variance between a particular type of filter. And we'll talk about that as we get further into the episode. But these are really the three bullet points that we're working with. You either want to dim the image because it's too bright, you want to highlight a certain wavelength because you're trying to observe something in that wavelength, or you want to get rid of stuff that is hindering your image. So yes. So filter mechanics. There are two sizes of filters, and I don't have a picture for this at the moment. I didn't have all of them together. And this is really based off the accessories that we use in astronomy. Let me just go to this one. There we go. So there are two common sizes in the modern day that we use. There's 1 1/4 and there's 2 inch. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. You probably have a selection of this stuff sitting in an eyepiece case somewhere. But generally 1 1/4 and 2 inch. There is 0.965 eyepieces. They still are around if you do some digging. Usually really cheap stuff uses 0.965. There are some really high quality 0.965s that are more vintage stuff. And maybe if we do a vintage equipment episode in the future, we'll do that. I've been getting more into vintage stuff. I've got a stack of vintage books and stuff behind me right there we could talk about sometime, but also the telescopes as well. So, but ultimately, you don't see a lot of 0.965 anymore, and we're really just going to stick with the two basic sizes, which is 1 1/4 and 2 inch. And filters come in both of those sizes very commonly, so you can figure out what you need. Comment on here. It should be remembered that all filters reduce light, which reduces what the eyepiece and sensor sees. Yes, that is correct. You are passing light through a filter. It is going to reduce light no matter what. And I'll kind of elaborate on that as we break down each particular filter because they all reduce light in some way, shape, or form. So light gets focused from your optics, whether it's a mirror or a lens, it focuses down and then it passes it through the filter. You can either put filters on the end of your eyepiece, like you see in the picture right here. Most eyepieces, Barlows, extension tubes, even diagonals, a lot of our major accessories all have filter threads on them to accept most filters out there. So it's a pretty common thing. But as far as where you place the filter, particularly for visual work, it doesn't really matter where you place it. A lot of us just put this right on the edge of the barrel of the eyepiece, like you see here, just threads right into the bottom barrel. Just make sure the filter utilized matches the size of your eyepiece barrel. So if it's inch and a quarter filter. If it's 2-inch filter, something like that. But you can also thread it to the end nose piece of your diagonal if you need to do so. There are certain types of filters that there's really only one that comes to mind, and that's a minus violet filter, which we will talk about towards the end. But it's a filter that really allows you to reduce chromatic aberration on achromatic refractors. So if you don't have an apo that's using the fancy glass to do all the color correction, and that purple fringing is really bothering you, you can use a filter called a minus violet filter, which kind of cuts that purple fringe down, and you can get what I would call a poor man's apo at that point. So you could actually thread that to the front of the diagonal, because odds are, if you're observing a lot of bright things, that filter is going to stay in the light path for the majority of the night. But I prefer to put filters on my eyepieces because a lot of times I am just utilizing a filter for a particular target. And when I'm done, I remove that and go on with my day. Question: have you tried these filters on a Teleview 55 Plossel? I yet converted the 55. Okay, sorry. Have you tried these filters on a Teleview 55 millimeter? Yet converted the 55 millimeter to the 67 millimeter version. Okay, so backtracking this just a little bit. Teleview sells a 55 millimeter Plossel. Yes, I've owned two of them. My first one got stolen when all my stuff got broken into a few years ago. And then I replaced it with another 55 eventually. I have since sold the 55 because I greatly prefer the 41 panoptic, which gives me a very similar field of view. But I've also used, for night vision, Teleview also offers a lens that threads into the top of the 55 millimeter Plossel, making it a 67 millimeter eyepiece. Let me see if I can just find this for you guys and bring it up on Teleview's website. Here's the 55 Plossel. Great eyepiece, very nice low power eyepiece. Really ideal for larger Schmidts, I would say. Like the C14 or C11, honestly. I've seen it used on 10-inch Meads, 12-inch Meads, 14, 16, so on and so forth. Anything that needs a long eyepiece. It's a nice eyepiece. They're not too expensive, fairly lightweight. They really work well with the night vision. But Teleview actually sells... Do they list it here, or is it all under their night vision stuff? Teleview sells this little... Sorry, I gotta find it. Anyway, it's in here somewhere. I don't know exactly where it's sitting. But if you're doing night vision, Teleview sells this little lens that threads into the front or the top of the eyepiece that makes it a 67 millimeter, which is really low power. I've used it visually on a Daystar. It actually worked really well. If you need a 67 millimeter long focal length eyepiece, I've used it visually, but I haven't used filters on it. Like I said, I didn't really use the 55 Plossel much. I use them all the time on my 41 panoptic. No problem. So should work just fine. But you can thread filters anywhere that you want, either the end of the diagonal if you're using a Schmidt Cassegrain that has a diagonal that has threads, if you're using a Cassegrain of some kind, or you can put it on the eyepiece if you're using it anywhere. Now, if you have a Dobsonian, some people have these really big filter sliders, so they load different filters in and you don't have to touch them at all. You just move whatever you want into place. Other people I've seen actually use the manual filter wheels, and they put those in the light path, and you can kind of just click through the various filters. That's a nice idea too. And if you have a telescope like a Schmidt Cassegrain or a refractor that actually has the focus travel to allow that, and you use filters a lot, that's not a bad idea either. So it just depends on how you want to go about it. There's a bunch of options out there, so pick your poison. Filter graphs. If you're buying a filter, this applies to visual or imaging, you're going to probably find a graph. And a filter graph kind of tells you what the filter's doing and where it's designed to work and yada, yada, yada. So let me tell you some of the details that you want to look for. For visual, it's not as big of a deal. For imaging, this is a really good thing to look at because there's a couple little things you want to look primarily at. So the way these graphs work is you have the x-axis along the bottom and you have the y-axis along the edge. So on the y-axis of these, you're going to have what's called the filter transmission in percentage, 0 being nothing, 100 being 100%. Most filters, most anything isn't going to have a 100% light transmission to go through it. It is going through glass. And when you put light through glass, there is going to be some slight reduction in transmission. But if it's done really well, it's generally in the high 80s, even into the mid 90s if you've got a really nice filter. And the high quality ones are usually in the 90% range. On the bottom, you have the wavelength, generally in nanometers. That's telling you where the spectrum of the filter is. So there you go. There's light throughput on your y-axis, and on the x-axis, you're going to have your light range of what the filter handles. And then if we take our visible spectrum that we did earlier and we apply it on top of this, you get this. So over on the left side, and it's not 100% accurate. I tried to get it pretty close because technically the human eye can see to about 380 nanometers, which is in the UV. And then we go up to about 700. So it's close. But anybody in the chat or watching this who wants to get like super particular about it, yes, I understand it's not dead on. It's not supposed to be. We're just using it as an example. But anyway, here's the visible spectrum applied on top of one of the filter graphs. Now, when you actually look at a filter graph, it's going to kind of look like this. You're going to have the graph, you're going to have your nanometer range at the bottom, you're going to have transmission percentage at the left, and then you're going to see a bunch of peaks and valleys and stuff like that. And it can be flipped. It depends on how the manufacturer of the filter wants to showcase it. So it can be flipped, but generally what you're looking for is peaks and valleys. So the peak is going to show you what wavelength of light is being passed. And then what you're looking for, particularly when we're talking narrowband filters, which are very selective filters, which we're going to talk about, the narrower the actual body of the peak is, the tighter the bandpass is going to be. The tighter the bandpass means more contrast that's actually visible when using the filter. This applies more towards the world of imaging because with imaging, you can use a variety of filters, but a lot of people like to use narrowband filters, which are highly selective filters, which block everything out except one particular wavelength or a handful of very precise selected wavelengths. And when you're imaging, generally you want to get as much contrast out of that as possible, so you're going to pay more money to get these narrow bandpass filters. Now, if it's what's called a broadband filter, which will be, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but if it's broadband, you're going to see a bunch of peaks, maybe some big plateau sections, and a bunch of valleys, and, you know, kind of looks like a heart monitor. You just hope your heart monitor never looks like a filter graph. But anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at. So now that we kind of know the basics of filters, let's talk about the most basic types of filters, and then we'll move up to the more exotic stuff. So first off, our color filters. These are super common. And if you've ever bought like an eyepiece kit or the Celestron 1.25" eyepiece kit, it comes with a selection of these. They're available all over the place, and they're generally fairly affordable. So color filters come in a very wide range of colors. And generally it's the glass that is colored itself. So what these filters do is they allow certain frequencies or wavelengths to pass through. These are very broadband filters. They're not using really high-end dielectric coatings where it looks like a mirror. You can see through these things. And then you'll notice that each filter is a particular color or shade, because you can get them in a lot of different shades depending on which exact color we're aiming. And if the real point of them is certain shades can help bring out certain details on the planets. So these are best used for planetary viewing. And I have friends who really like them, and I have other people who don't like them. I find there's usually two different camps. And why is everyone freaking about the green filter? These are brand new filters. The green filter closest is green, and then the one behind it is a light green. They're different shades. So the darker one's going to do more than the light green one. So everyone's saying like, oh, the poor green filter. There's no scratches on any of those filters. It's just reflections of the filter in front of it. These are brand new filters. And the reason I know they're brand new filters is because I opened them this morning when I took this picture. And I'm not a fan of color filters, so I don't use these. So they're just there as examples when we do outreach events and stuff like that. So no, all these are brand new. There's no scratches on any of the filters here. So, but color filters are primarily used for planetary observing and bringing out certain details. And this is where you kind of want to understand the colors and what they do, and we'll break that down as best we can. So here's an example, thanks to Celestron. They sell this little kit that's kind of situated for color filters. Here's an example of what we're talking about. So you can see the blue filter brings out some of the dark details in the ice regions and maybe some high clouds on Mars. The green filter kind of brings out more of the highland regions and some of the dark, but you don't get as much pop on the ice. And then red is really good at bringing out those dark features on Mars, but you can see that you really don't get much of the ice caps. But all that is basically there. So there you go. That's a basic example. Now there are different shades that do different things within the major colors. So you've got blue, green, red, all that there. And all that. So what's the question? Random question. Are you the Kevin I saw posting a C8 Edge for sale? Yes, that's me. So it's here. So, as far as shades of colors, you're getting in, when you get into color filters, a lot of these are based off of color photographic filters. And you're getting something on side of the filter called a Ratten number. The Ratten number is how you can ID the particular color or shade that the filter is utilizing. And if you want to read all through the different shades, go ahead. There's a lot of them. Ratten numbers are generally 1 to 82. And then there's all kinds of ones in between. There are other ones that exist, but for astronomy, we're primarily aimed at 11 to 82. And then there's different ones within those numbers. So, yeah, there you go. So here's some common color breakdowns. Now, I will let you know that Agena Astro has an amazing write-up on color filters. They have a huge article that they've written up about different shades. I even think they have like a key that breaks all of it down. So if you're interested in getting color filters, head over to Agena Astro and look through their stuff. And they have a tremendous resource on their website there. So, and these filters are very affordable. They're, I think, really good ones are maybe like $50 a piece. And then your average ones, you know, $20 maybe new. I don't know. They're not expensive. I would also say that you can get these in 1.25" and 2" but when you're observing planets, a lot of times you're using very high power, eyepieces, and most of those high power eyepieces are 1.25". I don't know that I would really recommend going out and getting a big old set of 2" color filters just get the 1.25" ones and use them for the high power lenses. That would be my recommendation. It's your money. You can do whatever you'd like. So here's just a rough breakdown of everything. So you have number 12, yellow. A lot of these are from Lumicon. Lumicon, I don't think is making filters anymore, but they had a major selection of filters. And so I was basing this off this. So you have number 12, yellow. This is really good for observing Venus. It's going to reduce, it's going to give you some of that contrast. It can possibly help you view clouds in the atmosphere on Mars, and can improve contrast when your viewing isn't great, particularly seeing conditions, because it is isolating more of the wavelengths. Orange, number 21. This works on the moon. What I really don't like about color filters, and should be really obvious, is it changed the whole field of view to that color. I don't like that. I want to have my cake and eat it too, but that's just my personal viewing style. So this can also help on Jupiter, particularly with the bands and the red spot. And then you can also help with Saturn. Then we get to this guy, 80A blue. This is probably one of the most utilized filters that you can get. So if you're gonna get one, I would start here. And a lot of the basic sets of filters generally include the 80A blue because it's useful. This is really good for Mars. It's really good on Jupiter, and it can help on Saturn. So your big 3 planets, this particular shade of blue is utilized quite a bit. So this is why it's generally included in like the Celestron eyepiece kit, and you'll probably find anybody else who makes a filter kit for color filters. Generally, this one is in it. Let's see, questions. As an observer of carbon stars, I've noticed that some eyepieces bring out the color better than others. Will filters make any difference? I feel like filters might mess up the view because carbon stars, especially if you get something like T Lyra, which is like this ruby red star. It's beautiful star. One of my favorite ones to look at, actually. There's no filter that's really going to work because you are looking at something that's stellar, and it's already red. So there's no filter. I mean, maybe if you used it, I don't know. It's not going to show you anything that you're not going to be able to see already. So I don't know that a filter is really going to do anything for you on carbon stars. And any filter that you use, if it's a color filter, it's going to change every star red if you're using a red filter. But you could experiment with it, I guess. But being that all you're looking at is just a point of red or orange light, generally they're very easy to distinguish amongst the star field that, okay, that is the carbon star in the field. Filters aren't really needed when you're doing binaries and variables and carbon stars. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but from what I know, it's not something that I would utilize. Let's see. Are UHC and Oxygen 3 strictly visual filters, or are they used for photography quite often as well? So we'll get to the narrow and broadband filters here in a bit. UHC, I've heard people of using it for imaging. O3 is very useful for imaging, but on an imaging O3, you're going to be a very tight band pass to get that contrast up. O3s for visual are probably somewhere around 15 to 25 nanometers in bandwidth. That's really broad for imaging. Like an average O3 filter for imaging is probably about 7 nanometers. So it's like half of a visual. And probably ones that most people use are sitting between 3 nanometer and 7 nanometer band pass for an O3 filter for imaging. That reduces so much light that visually it doesn't make much sense to use it. So visual filters like that generally have a wider band pass. So they get the job done, but by photographic standards, they're too broad. But anyway, that 80 blue, 80A blue, that's a good one right there. Now there are a bunch of other shades. I didn't want to, we could be here all day just talking about this. So if you want to know more, head over to Agena Astro and find their color filter write-up and their breakdown of them. They do a really nice job talking about many of these filters, and you can read it all day long. Polarizers and neutral density filters. You'll probably hear neutral density filters called ND filters. Again, also used in photography, but we'll talk about that. So polarizing filters, it's kind of my particular one. I don't have a set of ND filters just because you have to have a filter for all the different shades, which we'll talk about in a second. I like using the variable polarizer, which is basically two filters stacked and you rotate them and you can adjust the brightness. Actually, Mead had a really cool one. It looked like a little Barlow lens. You can find them used, but Mead made these. Look like a little Barlow, 1.25" only, and you put the eyepiece in there, and it had the little lever on it, and you could actually put the whole thing in the diagonal or the telescope, and you could actually adjust the polarizer filter without having to take it out and adjust it, put it in, then adjust it again, and keep taking the eyepiece in and out. Their variable polarizer was actually really well thought out. I would say that's one of Mead's best products as far as how well it was executed. So neutral density or polarizing filters, they're really there to reduce the brightness and glare of an object. It's really helpful on the moon, Jupiter. I really like using it on Venus because it can just get rid of some of that scatter and glare that you're getting. But it can be a very helpful thing. I also like using it during the day if you're doing any kind of viewing of these objects during daylight hours. You can get rid of some of that blue sky, too much going on. So you can use a polarizer or an ND filter if you like. Polarizers, again, they adjust. So you just rotate them until you get the brightness or darkness level that you want. I usually recommend these as your first filter. If you just got your first telescope, you're like, what should I get? Check out one of these. They're really good for the moon, especially when the moon gets past first quarter and it's getting really bright. You can use this to dim it down. A friend of mine uses one of these a lot when we're showing people the moon past first quarter, and it just reduces how bright it is on the eye. But it's generally two pieces of glass, and you rotate them until you adjust it. They're not too expensive either. So neutral density filters or ND filters. These are individual filters, and they come in different shades or densities as they would be known. Again, based off of photography. These allow you to get really quite more precise to what exactly you're trying to do over a variable polarizer filter. So you can actually pick from your filters of what density level that you want the filter to be. Obviously, if it's brighter, you're going to use a darker or a more dense filter. And if you're going to go not quite as dark, you're going to go lighter. And then they have each one marked with, what the density level actually is. Again, there's a wide variety of these. You just kind of got to pick what is going to work for you. So there you go. Question, are there any visual filters that help to see banding on Venus? Venus is really tricky. You'll never get the detail that you can get with a camera. Cameras are more sensitive, and usually the best way to see detail in the clouds on Venus is with the ultraviolet, or what's called a UV or a UVenus filter. Lumicon used to make one. I don't think they're making filters right now, and if they are, I think it's under a different name. I'm not sure. I think Optolong, I think, makes one, and maybe Antlia makes one. But those are ultraviolet filters, so way in the UV part of the spectrum. It's just not something that the human eye is going to easily see. I've never really seen detail on Venus at any point. Maybe someone else has, but you could try using a polarizer or ND, or maybe researching some of the color filters to see if they'll help. But For me, Venus is just, it's there, it's bright, that's it, ta-da. That's all there is to it. I've never been able to get detail on Venus. Deep sky filters. This is not a crack. There's no damage to these filters other than some dust. It's just a graphic that's in there. So there you go. Real quick, ND filters are usually labeled as the number of f-stops it is required to. Now, that's coming from the photography roots of it. So just do some research if you're going to look into NDs. Let's talk about deep sky filters. These are the pretty shiny, reflective, mirror-looking filters. I use my stuff. I don't abuse it, but they get used. These are tools. So you're lucky that they're that clean at this point. So I don't mind a little wear and tear. I like stuff that's got a story on it. So, and when we get to the vintage and historical antique episode, we'll talk about some of the newly acquired telescopes that are of those eras. They're not perfect. So deep sky filters, these are, for me at least, these are my most used filters. These allow you to adjust or really hone in on particular details of certain deep sky targets. Some of them are used to reduce light pollution. Some of them are used to improve contrast, but there's two major types of deep sky filters. There's broadband and narrowband filters. And then within those two categories, you have a selection of the rest of them. So let's do the easier one first. Let's talk broadband. Broadband filters allow a wide range of wavelengths to pass, and they're generally fairly selective of what they're blocking. So they're kind of tuned in for particular wavelengths. Your light pollution filters, like a CLS filter, or whatever the company's going to abbreviate it to, but most general light pollution filters that you're going to use, whether it's a deep sky filter or a CLS or LPS, light pollution suppression, they're all using their own terminology, but at the end of the day, they're ultimately kind of doing the same thing. They're passing a wide range of light, and they're blocking certain frequencies. And those frequencies that are being blocked generally are light produced by street lights and stuff like that. So here's a filter graph of a broadband filter. It's just an example, but you can see all the peaks. The peaks are the big plateaus. That's where the filter is passing the light. And for just the example, this one you can see is about 95% on the transmission. And then you can see wavelength wise what it passes. So every peak region, like these big areas, that's the light that's going through the filter, and all the valleys here are the sections that the filter is reducing or suppressing or even eliminating, depending on what we're doing. So there's an example of a broadband filter. Now, every filter from the manufacturer, you want to look at the specification in the graph because they're not all the same. Some of them get a little bit more selective. Some of them are made to tune out very specific types. So, but generally, broadband filters are for light pollution ultimately. But it will never be a dark sky sight. You can't just pop a filter in and, suddenly the Whirlpool Galaxy is just amazing detail and easy to see. I will say filters tend to work better with larger aperture backing them up, because the more light that goes through them, the better they tend to work. Question: have you really seen the Horsehead Nebula? Or do you think you've seen the Horsehead and not sure about it? No, I've seen the Horsehead. I didn't see the Horsehead Nebula until I got my 16-inch Dob back in like 2008 or something like that. It really took a scope that big to see it. Now it can be a difficult target to see. It's like looking for a black thumbprint on a black piece of paper sometimes. It's very ghostly. So what I tend to tell people, if you've never looked at the Horsehead before and you're trying, first off, point the telescope over to Alnitak, which is the big bright star. Then the next trick is to slowly move Alnitak out of the field of view. When you get Alnitak out of the field of view, you will see the flame nebula. If this isn't a dark sky site, which is really where you have to be to do this, you will see the flame nebula, usually below where Alnitak would be, and you know you're in the right spot. The next trick is to actually find IC 434. That's the red part of the nebula. The horse head is just the little horse head, the little Barnard 33 is what its name. When E.E. Barnard actually cataloged all these dark nebulas, that was the 33rd entry. So B33 is the horse head. IC 434 is the red part of the nebula. The trick here is you want to find IC 434, and it gets very difficult to see because it's heavy in hydrogen alpha. It's very much in the red part of the spectrum, and our eyes are not sensitive to that part of the spectrum. So when you get over there, you're going to get the telescope and you're going to slowly move it side to side. I like to do it with a daub because A, you've got more aperture, and B, manually, it's easier to move the scope side to side. And I like to wait and see what moves with the field. And if you're in a dark enough sky and you've got enough aperture backing you up, you'll start to catch the horsehead portion moving, and you'll see it. It's not going to punch you in the face, but it's there. It's very ghostly. So yeah. We'll get to that because we're going to talk about the particular filter that benefits that. So what's going on here? Thoughts on the DGM Optics NPB filters? I have a couple DGMs laying around. I haven't spent much time with them. DGM makes... Do I have one right here? What is this guy? Oh, these are IDAS filters. I have a DGM somewhere. DGM makes some really interesting filters. I wouldn't say they're not bad at all. They just kind of get overshadowed, but they've got some interesting ones that are kind of, I would say they're a little modified from some of the typical filters. I've heard really good things about DGM, but I haven't spent a lot of time researching them, so I can't give you a for sure answer. So horsehead is not hard with night vision. Yeah. The best way to see the horsehead nebula is with a really big daub, an H-alpha imaging filter, and night vision. As a walk in a park. You might as well be looking at the Orion Nebula at that point. It's like, oh, it's right there. Really easy to do. I'm going to move on. We might go over time today with the way we're going. So one of the most popular broadband filters, and probably the first filter for deep sky I would recommend, and actually do recommend, is what's called UHC, or ultra high contrast filter. These are available all over the place. My personal favorite, though, is the Astronomics. I like the way they're built. They've got good views through them. They're just really solid. Those are my favorite filters. I do have Optolongs. Those aren't bad either. They're a bit more affordable as well, but I love astronomic filters. So that's what I primarily use for the 3 deep sky filters. But UHC would be my first recommendation for deep sky filter. And it doesn't matter if it's what size it is, 1.25 inches, 2 inch. It just depends on what your accessories are needing. This is a broadband filter, but it's a very selected broadband filter. It's tuned specifically to block obnoxious light and highlight what you would get from a lot of nebulas and other objects. So I really like the UHCs. It's incredibly useful for a variety of targets. So that's why I would recommend, if you're looking at getting a filter, this would be the first one I would recommend getting, because it just handles a lot of different things. It's very effective on a wide range of targets. But it's really good with nebulas. So if you're into nebulas like myself, this is a good one to start with. And it's not so selective that it's going to block a ton of light, but it will help pop out and give you that contrast, ultra high contrast. What's the question? As cities move to streetlights that are LED rather than sodium or mercury vapor, the light pollution filters are less useful. Yes, LEDs, because of the way their spectrums work, are really hard to filter out. At least when you had sodium or mercury bulbs, you could, that's where a lot of these light pollution suppression filters, they're specifically tuned for the frequency of sodium or mercury to cancel that out. But with LED, because their spectrums are broad across, you can't tune them out. So LED is great from a power consumption side of things, but it's getting harder and harder to combat it with filters. But anyway, if you are like I said, if you're looking to get your first filter for deep sky, like a really nice filter to use, ultra high contrast, number one, right out of the gate, number one filter I would recommend. Now let's get into narrowband filters. So narrowband is like it sounds. These pass very precise selected wavelengths of light, and they block everything else. These are very specific tools, and you kind of have to know what object you're going to view in order when to put a narrowband filter into play. Now, we do have an older episode, maybe we can find the link somewhere, that talks specifically about visual filters and when to use them. It was a follow-up episode to this that we did a while ago, but we kind of broke it down on when do I use a broadband, when do I use a narrowband, and you can watch that episode if you'd like to complement this one. But narrowbands, like I said, pass very selective wavelengths of light. And you just have to know what frequency you're trying to observe. You can apply this same to imaging. So here's what a narrowband graph looks like. You can see there's nothing else there except one peak. And that peak is specifically tuned to whatever wavelength the filter is going to pass. And particularly the one that we're talking about here is kind of what a O3 or oxygen 3 filter does. Can the narrowband filter also block out LED? It's going to block out a lot of frequency of the LED, but whatever light the LED is producing in the region that the filter passes is also going to pass through. And that's the hard part about LEDs, is they have a very broad spectrum, where other light bulbs like mercury vapor or sodium, they emit light in a certain frequency, a particular color, and you can cut out that color using a filter. But when you have something that spreads the light across the whole spectrum, it's very hard to precisely remove that from what you're observing. That's why with oxygen 3 in particular, you also want to be aware of moonlight. Broader oxygen 3 filters will allow moonlight to pass through because of the frequency. The narrower that filter, the better though. But with visual filters, you don't really have a wide range of band passes to work with. How do I know I have a good UHC filter? What are the signs of a good UHC? Finding a good filter in general, I like to just go through and look at the reviews. Some of the best filter companies, I would say, is Botter. Makes some really good stuff. If you bought the Celestron ones, they're made by Botter. You can tell because of the way the grip on the ring, the mounting ring is. Astronomics are my personal favorite. And then if you're looking for more cost-effective ones, you have Optolong. They're not bad at all. Odds are the filters work pretty well, but I find the higher quality ones from the more expensive brands, the stars don't tend to have as weird of a color, and they look more sharp. So without knowing the brand, I'm not sure. That's really what to look for, but you can look at reviews on that one. Comment. A single polarizing filter can be used to increase the contrast of first and last quarter moon against the blue daytime sky. Great for showing telescopic views of the moon during daytime. Awesome. Oh, thanks very much, Robert. Digging further into narrowband filters. So bandpass is something that you hear more from the imaging side of things, because from visual perspective, we don't have a selection of bandpass too much. When you're imaging, you've got 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer, 6 nanometer, 7 nanometer, something like that usually listed. Visual, it's just O3 or UHC, because if you get too narrow of a filter, there's not enough light for you to see the object there. But bandpass is generally measured in nanometers when we're doing deep sky filters, and the narrower the bandpass, the more contrast you're going to get, and also the filter costs more. So here's another graph. So the narrower the base of the bandpass, the more precise it's going to be. But also passes a lot less light. So here's some narrowband filters for visual. First off, you're going to have oxygen 3. What you're actually doing here is you're passing double ionized oxygen, which is very common in emission nebulas and planetary nebulas. And it sits right here in this part of the spectrum. This is where oxygen 3 is. You can see it's kind of a blue, light blue, green part of the spectrum there. Moonlight reflects a lot of light in this part of the spectrum. So an O3 isn't great when the moon is up. So just, it'll still work. It's not going to block some of the moonlight there. So just be aware of that. But this passes light right around 500 nanometers on the visible spectrum. I would say most visual O3s are somewhere around 20, 25 nanometer band pass, which is fine for visual, but that's huge for imaging. Too much for imaging. If you're in a pinch, you could do it, but you want something more selective. Then we talked about passes double ionized oxygen. I find these are best used on 6-inch or 150 millimeter and larger telescopes, but you can use it on any telescope that you want. Just remember that when you are using, particularly when you're using narrowband filters, they are cutting everything out except that frequency that you're aiming for. So you're reducing a lot of light. I like using this. 3, 10 nanometers. You can get them broader than that though. The oxygen 3 filter would be my number 2 filter that I would acquire if you're starting to get into deep sky filters. First the UHC, then the oxygen 3. They complement each other really well. Oxygen 3 is really good for planetary nebulas like Eskimo, Blue Snowball, Ring Nebula, basically any planetary nebula. Planetary nebulas are very heavy in the oxygen 3. It also works great on other emission nebulas like Orion. Orion explodes with an oxygen 3 filter. Very impressive sight with O3. The Veil Nebula, my personal favorite. This is the weapon of choice for the Veil Nebula. If you're trying to be like, how can I see more of the Veil? UHC does okay. O3 brings it home. There's a lot of oxygen 3 in that nebula, and that's where you really get this cool, ethereal, wispy, all this kind of crazy stuff going on in there. So, and finally, H beta, probably the most questioned filter of the trio, or the holy trinity of deep sky filters. UHC, O3, H beta. H beta should be the last filter you buy. And I think there just was something that came up in the chat here. Where'd it go? Oh, sorry, it jumped. Yeah, there's a link somewhere. Cloudy Nights has a fairly large list of objects for H beta. Try looking at the full moon with an O3. It makes a lot of the material pop out. Question, I use the filter. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped there. There's a big, maybe someone could put the link in there if you find it. But on Cloudy Nights, there's a big list of what you can see with an H beta filter. We'll try to keep this on topic at the moment. H beta is a very selective filter. It works on a wide range of nebulas, and it actually shows you the same detail that H alpha does, but alpha is 656 nanometers, point yada, yada, yada. But right about 656 nanometers is where hydrogen alpha exists in the spectrum. And our eye is not sensitive to the red part of the spectrum where 656 nanometers exists. We are way more sensitive in the greenish part of the spectrum. So H beta is just a slightly less excited version for hydrogen, being the beta line. So it's not as energetic as alpha is. But beta is 486 nanometers. It's not too far down the road from oxygen 3. So it's a much easier thing for us to see. And it's a really effective filter, although it's kind of been tagged with the horsehead filter, because the horsehead is red, or IC434, the nebula around the horsehead, is red. Our eye has a very hard time seeing that frequency in very dim light. So we have to go to the next best thing, which is H beta. And it's really kind of the secret sauce for you to pull the horsehead out a little bit more. You still are going to need dark skies. The more aperture you've got, the better. And it is still a challenge. In a 20-inch telescope with an H beta filter, I can see the horsehead. It's easy to do. I've had other people that don't have that capability. It's very dependent on who's viewing. But there's a wide range of stuff. The California Nebula looks good with H beta. I'm sure the North American looks good in H beta because it's also one of those red nebulas. Orion M42 looks way different with H beta. It's actually one of my favorite objects to use H beta on. So when you look at a picture of the Orion Nebula, you see the wings. Then you have M43 down here. And then you kind of have the back portion that comes up that's got all the stars and little wisps inside of it. O3 filters are really good at bringing out kind of those wings and a little bit of the detail in the back end. It looks great. H beta, on the other hand, really brings out that back detail really well. It's actually really striking how well it works on that. So don't just think the H beta is only the Horsehead Nebula. It's not. But you may have to do a little bit more digging and experimentation to figure out what the filter really works with. Yes, we are going to go over time today. H beta filters, because of how selective they are, I would recommend probably a 10-inch or larger telescope. It can work on smaller telescopes. I'm not saying don't use it. It's just its best performance is probably on larger instruments. Let's see. Why is this bouncing around? There we go. Question. I use a filter wheel for visual to go through various filters, but have trouble achieving focus on Dobbs, as you will. With that extra width, any suggestions on how to achieve focus with that extra width and height? Not really. Newtonians are notorious for having very limited back focus. You might be able to modify some things. Maybe you can move the mirror up a little bit. But yeah, Newtonians are not friendly when you add more things into the focuser, unless it's designed to do that. That's why a lot of places will do like a filter slide inside the telescope where it's mounted inside the tube and it sits right in front of the opening for the focuser. Some of the high-end truss Dobbs will offer this, but that way it doesn't give you any focus problems. It usually sits right in front of where the eyepiece is. So light comes in, hits the primary, goes up to the secondary, goes through the filter, then up into the eyepiece, and then you focus there. But it's not eating up any back focus. That would be the only real option other than just putting it on the eyepiece itself. The filter wheels do eat up some of your back focus, so it's going to be best utilized on telescopes that have a wider range of focus travel, like refractors or a Cassegrain. But for a Newtonian, you really probably need a filter slide just so it doesn't eat it up. Any filter worth using on the sun on my Lunt 40? Nope, it's already doing the job. It's got the filters built in. There's nothing that's going to do it any different because it's already doing all the work. Comment about old eyes. There is also a high component of age related to observing dim objects, which is why at 70 plus, I'm using a lot of photography to observe dim objects. Yes. As our eyes age, it gets harder and harder because the pupil in the eye does not open up enough anymore. Also, as our eyes age, it tends to yellow the lenses of the eye. That's why if you've ever observed calcium K or the solar filter calcium K, that's way over in the UV part of the spectrum. It's hard to see it because our eyes are yellowing a bit and it blocks that frequency. And then when you have surgery to correct that, a lot of people, I have a good friend of mine who's probably watching this, he's able to see calcium now because he's had the eye surgery to correct for that, and he's able to see it again. So younger eyes generally are better at seeing the fainter details, but that's also why we have electronic assisted astronomy with cameras and the smart eye and stuff like that, where if you can't see this stuff anymore visually, maybe a camera can help. I know it's not the same, but at least you can still enjoy the hobby. Why does the chat thing keep bumping? What about UV IR filters? UV IR filters, you can use them for visual. They really just kind of trim off the edges of what you're looking at. It can kind of help stabilize some of the view. That way you're not getting some of the heat, particularly in the IR. You don't really use them too much, but you could if you wanted to. They are probably better utilized for imaging purposes to help sharpen up an image, particularly on cameras that don't have a UV IR, but you don't hear them from visual. Skywatcher 10-inch f15 Mac. No, not happening. So I tried, but not happening. So it was too big. We couldn't make one that big. So, but like I said, people call it the Horsehead Nebula filter, the H-beta filter. It's the last filter I would recommend you go get. It's really nice to have it, and it works really cool on a lot of objects, but I would recommend UHC, O3, then H-beta. Let me get through this. Specialty filters. We talked about these earlier, minus violet filters. They're around, but because pretty much every refractor now is an ED or apochromat of some kind, you don't hear about this much. But a minus violet filter reduces chromatic aberration in achromatic refractors. They're around. They're really inexpensive filters, but you can find them, but you don't see them much anymore because of how affordable apo refractors are becoming. Comet filters. Lumicon used to make these. I bought this one years ago at this point. It's kind of like an O3 filter, but it also passes cyanogen, which is very common in comets, particularly the green part of the comet. I think Optilong or Antlia, one of them actually makes a comet filter as well. I have it. I can't say I've really ever seen anything that I couldn't already see with it. It's there. I don't know that I would recommend go spending the money on it, but it's in the toolbox if I need it. So, you can actually utilize it as a deep sky filter, and it can get interesting, but it's very similar to an oxygen 3 filter because it passes O3. But you know, your mileage may vary on it. I wouldn't say rush out and go get one. Even with all the comets that we've had recently, never used it, just went out and looked. So, but I've got it. If you're at an event with me and you come up and you've got a scope and you want to try it, just ask. You can borrow it. So, Mars filters. These are kind of nice. Because we're running behind, let me just push through this real quick. They're a broadband filter. They're kind of designed to bring out all kinds of different details. I wouldn't say they're a total waste of money, but Mars is like an every other year target, and not every year is great. So you can have it if you want it. I think I've got one laying around here somewhere. Most of they really only need to be 1.25 inches because, again, high power for planets. It's a nice filter. I prefer them over color filters. I'll leave it at that, but I wouldn't say go out there and get it. Solar filters. If you ever find a solar filter that threads onto an eyepiece, you need to either keep it in a display box as an old school vintage thing that you acquired, or you need to destroy it and throw it away. Do not ever use these old school eyepiece solar filters. These are extremely dangerous, and the reason being is because all the light is being focused down onto that filter. Now, you might be asking, well, Kevin, what about the Herschel wedge you recommend all the time? A Herschel wedge is a very specially designed prism that is designed to take the heat and dissipate it so it doesn't damage it. These are just dark pieces of glass, and if you put dark glass at the focus point, it will crack and shatter because it's absorbing all that heat. So I have one of these somewhere. I don't actually know. It's just a historical tidbit laying around of a time long since past. But if you have one, please get rid of it or just put it in a case and be like, remember when we did that and it wasn't a great idea? Yeah, that's what it's there for. Lastly, my recommended filter sets. So first off, and you can apply any size that you want, 1.25 inch, 2 inch, just depends on your accessories. I love polarizer filters. They're kind of my go-to for the moon and some of the brighter objects. A nice polarizer, good to have. Ultra high contrast. First filter I would recommend if you're getting into deep sky filters. And don't be afraid to spend a little money on these, because if you're getting these are going to stay with you and they'll work on any eyepiece that you like. So don't be afraid to spend some money on these, because once you have them, you have them. It's not like you're buying all these different filters all the time. Do I even have one laying around? Some of you might be asking, it's like, well, do I need to get 1.25 inch and 2 inch? No. What I like to do is any 1.25 inch that I have, most of my telescopes are 2 inch anyway. Excuse me. I get 1.25 inch to 2 inch adapters, and most of them nowadays have this feature. Those are threaded for 2 inch filters. Hold on. I have a picture here somewhere. Where? Oh, here. Wait, no. Did I not download it? Dang it. Oh, wait, there it is. I like to do this. So I don't want to spend a bunch of money on filters if I don't have to. I already have a nice set of my 2 inch filters. If you have 1.25 inch, but you're using 2 inch diagonals or 2 inch accessories or 2 inch focusers, get yourself 1.25 inch to 2 inch adapters and get them with the 2 inch with threading filter thread capability on there. And that means you can use your 2 inch filters on your 1.25 inch eyepieces, and you don't have to buy a set of 1.25 inch and a set of 2 inch filters, because that gets expensive. So that would be my recommendation for that. Get yourself a nice set of 2 inch and just get adapters. So hopefully that helps you there. So again, polarizer, UHC, then I would get the O3, then the H beta, and then my 2 recommended other filters that I highly recommend, especially from the planet perspective, because I don't like color filters. They make everything look weird and it bugs me, is the Botter Moon and Sky Glow, which there's a typo there. There's Sky Glow, not Ski Glow. And then the Botter Contrast Booster. Both of those can also be used as deep sky filters. They're kind of lighter broadband filters. I kind of like to think of them as diet UHCs. They can be really effective for stuff like that. So they kind of bounce between planetary and deep sky capability. That's like the 6 filters that I would actually recommend. And then if you want to get the Comet filter, go ahead. But this is what's in my case right now. These 6 filters that handles everything that I ever need to do. And I have used these filters for years, and once you've got them, you got them. So there you go. All right, everyone. We went like 10 minutes over. I hope that was helpful for everyone. But that is Visual Filters Revisited. Hopefully that helps you out. If you're getting a telescope for the holidays, there's some good accessories. Filters make great stocking stuffers. They're not terribly expensive, and they're little. But yeah, there you go. But if you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on the channel. You can also head over and check out our used items as well. You head over here, you go to deals and go to used, and there's all kinds of stuff there. You can get a real nice price on some stuff. Again, if you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe. Next week is our last live episode of 2025. We have completed like our 5th year of doing this. Actually, I think March of next year. I don't know. Anyway, we've been doing this for like 5 years, which is hard to believe. But to round out the end of the year, we're going to have our buddy Dave Eicher. Astronomy Magazine editor emeritus is going to be on here. It'll be great to sit down and talk with Dave. He is a great person to talk to, extremely knowledgeable about the hobby, amazing with historical stuff. He's quite a collector of really historic antique items from astronomy, and I'm just getting into that myself. So we'll have Dave on. He'll be our final guest of the year. It'll be a nice little bow for the end of the year. And yeah, there we go. So thanks all for watching. Hope it was helpful. If you guys have anything else, email us at info@skywatchusa.com, and have a great weekend. Stay warm out there, and we will see you guys for our final episode of 2025 next Friday. Take it easy. Safe travels. Bye.